I'll be talking about climate justice in the Caribbean, but I'll be specifically speaking on a particular issue, deep sea mining and its relationship with the kind of advocacy that we've been doing. So firstly, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about who in Terrell's introduction, he kind of mentioned JET. Our focus is on protecting Jamaica's natural resources, and we do this through education, conservation, advocacy, and the law. With the hope of or trying to influence individual and organizational behavior, as well as public policy and practice. Despite this often thankless work, we are motivated by the desire to safeguard the future generations to come. Now, our efforts focus primarily on addressing environmental issues, but they're closely intertwined with the broader concept of climate justice. And we recognize that a healthy environment and resilient ecosystems are essential for mitigating the impacts of climate change. We also understand that many of the communities that face environmental justice challenges, such as your poor, the rural, marginalized, they're also most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Just a few snapshots of some of the kind of work that we do, and then some of the publications, recent publications. For over a decade, I just want to highlight that, we have been focused heavily on the extractive industry in Jamaica, bauxite and limestone quarrying, and not only because of the environmental and ecological degradation, but also the impacts on public health and human rights. And I'm not going to speak about the bauxite and alumina industry. I'm actually going to talk more about deep sea mining, and I know some of you have probably heard me speak at the climate justice camp. And I'm not going to get into too much details. It will be an overview, but I want to talk also about the lessons learned, some of the things that we've been doing, so that we can learn from each other. Briefly, deep sea mining, I've just put up a graphic here. We became involved, before I get into the details, we became involved in deep sea mining or the issues around it in 2019. When we learned that Jamaica was going to become a sponsoring state. That contract was later signed in March 2021. But before that, we had engaged in information seeking, submitting access to information requests, participating in peaceful protests with Greenpeace as well. I will just let you know here that we were denied access to any of this information on the grounds that it was confidential, despite the fact that there were potential impacts on the Jamaican taxpayer. So why were we concerned? Well, deep sea mining is a new proposed extractive industry, which intends to remove, as you can see from the image, it kind of like imagine some big vacuum cleaners along the deep seabed, moving along and removing minerals like your copper, your nickel, hundreds or thousands of meters below the surface of the sea. It has been positioned by a few who stand to benefit financially as necessary to address the climate crisis by providing essential minerals for the transition from fossil fuels to batteries. And this despite the fact that we know that technology is already moving away from the minerals found in the deep sea, and the fact that most of the minerals can actually be that are needed for the green transition can actually be supplied by recycled minerals by 2050. We know very little about this vast ecosystem, which comprises over 90% of the marine environment. The impacts can be devastating with significant global reach, and the uncertainty around deep sea mining is not only in terms of the environmental science, but also in terms of legal, ethical justice issues and geopolitical issues. It will disrupt pristine environments, leading to significant environmental repercussions and biodiversity loss, ecosystem disruption. A recent report by Planet Tracker in 2023 concluded that deep sea ecosystems are essentially unrestorable, and estimated that the cost of restoration from deep sea mining would be so prohibitive that deep sea mining companies would struggle to cover and maintain profitability. Okay, so I've touched on, the why, but let's look at it in relation to a climate justice issue. So if you haven't already picked it up, So the ocean is the greatest ally, one of the greatest allies to humanity in the fight against the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And it plays a vital role in climate and weather and is essential to all Earth and life. We need to protect it, or ocean protection is needed so that we can ensure health and maintenance of essential ecosystem services. And with ecosystem service degradation, it is possible that deep sea mining could negatively impact human rights on many different levels. Rights to clean and healthy and sustainable environment, rights to benefit from scientific progress, and rights to indigenous rights, including protection of cultural heritage. We have further impacts such as access to information, participation in decisions, access to justice, children's rights. There's a whole lot of issues there. And while these impacts have the potential to be felt globally, it will be those the most vulnerable, those in the global south, the small island developing states that are most likely to feel these impacts. And these states are already extremely vulnerable to climate change. Okay, I touched on that. Deep sea mining intersects with climate justice on multiple levels. We have disproportionate impact on vulnerable communities, environmental justice concerns, and I won't be able to touch everything. But we can see here, this is just a graphic that kind of highlights some of the issues. We don't have diversity of stakeholders in the decision-making process. We don't have equity in the decision-making process. We don't have equitable distribution of costs and benefits. And so this is a real justice issue that has the potential to impact globally, but also even the most vulnerable groups. So I'm not going to spend much more time talking on deep sea mining itself and the potential impacts. I want to talk about the actions that have been taken. So since 2019, the Jamaica Environment Trust, with a very small staff of less than 5, we have been engaged in a number of actions. We have written letters, we have submitted access to information requests, we have had meetings, we have joined with other groups so that we can increase our numbers. So for example, there is a WhatsApp group where I think it's called Action Against DSM. And we are just a bunch of individuals from different NGOs or just private citizens that are concerned, that we have joined together to discuss strategy, to participate in peaceful protests. We have written letters, as I've mentioned earlier. We've done some things on social media. We've had outreach activities to schools. We have had a joint press conference together. We've also done it with Greenpeace and other local and international groups. We have actually requested a meeting with our Minister of Environment to try and better understand the position of the government of Jamaica and also to ask them to reconsider their position. I just want to say here that it was very clear during that meeting that the perceived profit was more important than the potential impacts on people and planet. Okay, so these are some of the images here. We participated. These were mostly young people in the Jamaica Climate Change Council, Youth Council. And this is on the right of a press conference that we participated with a number of different groups. Okay, the experience, I've been asked to share about our experiences. I think a lot of you can relate to this is something you can relate to with any kind of advocacy efforts. It's exhausting. It can be very challenging, overwhelming at times, and very important. But it's very important to celebrate even the smallest wins. Now, what did we learn from all of those different experiences, the meetings, the letter writing? Well, one thing is that you can't rely on one action. You can't rely on a letter, an article, a press release. We can't rely on the fact that people may understand the scientific issues, because many people do not, especially something like deep sea mining, which we found is not relatable the first question we would be asked often was, where is this happening? Oh, not Jamaica? Oh, okay, well then why do we need to care about it? Yeah, I think it was similar to when we initially would start talking about climate change, and we were seeing all of these things about the polar bears, the ice caps, and people would be disconnected from that reality and from their existing reality. So on a level, yes, okay, maybe we should care about it, but the fact is, why should I become involved and engaged if it doesn't directly impact me? So this is something that we learned, that when we are having the communications at different levels, that we need to relate, try and find a relatable topic on a matter like this, which is quite complex. And I will tell you that one of the things that we learned about being relatable is that people care about money. And because we are a sponsoring state, we are trying to reposition our conversation to how it will affect you as a taxpayer, being a sponsoring state, the liability issues, and so forth. And we find that while that seems to be getting a little bit further when we speak about money versus the science, because it seems just too far away. We also learned that it was better to work together. We can't do this by ourselves. We could not do this alone. And we don't have the facility, we don't have the resources to do the kind of actions, sustained actions. And so it was very good to work together, even in an informal. We don't have an MOU among ourselves, but we also became a member of the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, which includes more than 100 non-governmental organizations worldwide. Fisheries Association Law Policy Institute. So for example, if I'm writing a scientific, an article or a letter to I can't do, I'm not an expert in this. I know a bit, but we have access to experts who can help to review and ensure that when we're speaking from a place of knowledge, and we're accurate in our information sharing, because it's very important to us that we are correct in how we speak, we're accurate in how we speak. We also learn that it's important to be very clear and easy in how we communicate, not to be overly scientific. Even in complex topics, it's very important to find a way to connect with people at the language level. And again, I mentioned working together for impact, acknowledge your limitations and ask for help. You cannot be an expert in everything, and we're definitely not an expert in everything. We have had a lot of experience in the extractive industry in Jamaica. And so we have used those lessons learned in how we have approached this, but it is important to acknowledge that you don't know everything and you need help. And again, as I've mentioned, engage in different ways. Can't just stick to one approach. Can't just be peaceful protests. It can't just be letter writing. We have to find a way to connect with the public so that they can help too. And we learned this a lot through the Cockpit Country, our Safe Cockpit Country campaign, which after 2 decades of advocacy, we finally got it protected. We also learned that it's important to engage the public at different levels on matters around environmental justice, and not just environmental justice, I actually meant to say climate justice. So what we did was we recognized that the legal fraternity was also very important. And we engaged with them on a project, and we will continue to engage with them over the course of the next couple of months, of I think a year and a half, on climate justice. So this seems like we realize that in engaging with lawyers, this is not something that they're familiar with. They're even in terms of relationship with our existing laws, our constitution. So what we did, our first seminar sought to introduce this emerging practice of climate litigation, and talk about climate justice and bring awareness of things like environmental justice and the extractive agreement. And we wanted to facilitate discussions of the practice of climate litigation and environmental and climate justice matters in the current legal infrastructure. So this was the purpose of this first, and we had over 88 participants in a hybrid setting. And there have been requests to do some more follow-up discussions, because people want to, lawyers, we focus on lawyers, they want to learn more and understand more. So this was also something that we learned, not just coming out of the deep sea mining work that we've been doing, but in general, that we need to engage in different ways. And finally, I've been when we talk about ways to get engaged around climate justice issues, and I know some of our next presenters might get into greater detail on some of these things, we need to understand the issues, but not just for ourselves, but also to actually do something. We need to understand why climate justice is important. We need to help to spread awareness, identify what role you can play in advancing climate justice work. And something that I learned from the climate justice camp is that it's so important to be there, even if it's not your work, to share your work, to share the work of the Copper Foundation or Greenpeace. Once you can see how important it is, you care about it. There are different actions that you can take. While you may not be able to participate in a protest, you may be able to do something else. Use your skill to assist. Very important to get organized. I think it's important that we understand, and this is not my quote. Michaela Loach in her book said this, everything can change. And once we believe that everything can change, that's when we can transform the world around us. And I kind of paraphrased it a bit. The climate justice movement, it needs all of us. It needs each of us in different capacities or unique skills or different perspectives. There is a role for each of us. And sometimes I must say that, in the midst of challenges, you feel hopelessness. However, what I have also learned is that hope is an active choice. It is a way of thinking, and we need to give ourselves that space to sometimes feel frustrated, to be panicked. We need to let go of the outcome. We can't control the outcome. We shouldn't focus on if we'll get anything, but we need to do what we can do and not allow ourselves to fall into apathy, because actions, we need to also know that other people's actions can inspire us, but true inspiration should be able to propel us into action. Activism, I'm going to put this up here. Activism is often stressful, emotional, and requires sacrifice, but often can bring tremendous joy because it can also bring people together, and we can get connections, we can have friendships, and it can be really fulfilling. And I put this up here. This was something that, again, Michaela Loach she's Jamaican. I'm promoting that she's Jamaican, although she has a British accent, and climate justice advocate and a best-selling author. This is something that she had put up recently on our social media. This was in relation to what's happening in Palestine and Israel, but she was speaking about getting organized, and rather than our thoughts and our words are sitting in helplessness, because you can feel helpless at times, it's important to get organized and understand that there is a role for each of us. And I hope I didn't go over my time, Terrell. Thank you.